Hello! So today I'm going to be talking about the Gillota article called Stand Up Nation Humor in American Identity. And I think I want to start off with my thesis for it, which was actually just on the first page, 102. It's before he starts talking about Huckleberry Finn, and he says, America's heroic individuals, however, are rarely just individuals. Rather, they tend to embody a key feature of the traditional American ideology. So I think that this is the thesis because throughout the article, he goes on to talk about stand up and like how a lot of stand up comedians are these key ideological characters almost. And then also talks about what American ideology is and goes on to also talk about two like examples, which I think was helpful, of who he thinks are like specific people who kind of represent a community, which I think is what he's saying with what I think the thesis is. And those two people are Ellen DeGeneres and Chris Rock. So going back to the beginning of the article, I think it was helpful, in my opinion, him starting to break down like normal characters that we see in like everyday culture, including just also referencing Huckleberry Finn, for example. He talks about how if Huck wasn't the way he was, then he wouldn't be who he is. And I know that doesn't really make sense, but what I mean by that is that like all of like if he didn't dress the same way, if he didn't talk the same way, if he didn't get into trouble, then he wouldn't be the hero that we see in him in Huckleberry Finn. And then he starts talking. David Gillota starts talking about he starts talking about locating an American identity and how it's about just the idea of who represents a community of people and how we can see it in a community of people. For example, a stand-up comedian who does this really well is Jeff Cable. What's his name? Jeff Foxworthy. The cable guy. There we go. He is a middle class, poor, almost lower class citizen who people can relate to. And a lot of stand-up comedians have to have relatability to them and have to have experiences where they are the heroes in their stories, such as Huck Finn, but also have people that have either oppressed them or felt like they've been oppressed by their community. So that's one of the things that American Identity has to do with stand-up comedians. Which kind of goes into what he starts talking about with Ellen DeGeneres and also with Chris Rock. For Ellen DeGeneres, he talks a lot about how once she came out of the closet, she then instantly became the LGBTQ lesbian leader of comedy, basically. And just how that influenced how she needed to talk and how people perceived her. And that has to do with the same with Chris Rock as well. Just that there's a specific show that I can think of where he talks about how he lived across the street from a dentist when he was growing up, and his father had to like be at the top of the boss to be in this neighborhood, yet his neighbor was a dentist, and maybe not even a good dentist, but he was white, so that made him able to be living there. But yeah, so this article talks a lot about, I think, how a lot of stand-up comedians need to be relatable and have a persona of being relatable. And it's actually funny because recently Ellen DeGeneres came out with a new stand-up show that was called Relatable, and basically the whole show was about how she didn't really have material that felt relatable anymore, or at least a lot of it had to do with the fact that like a lot of the opening was like her making a joke about how her friend, like when she told him about the fact that she was doing this show, that he was like, well, you're not relatable anymore, nobody's gonna find you funny. But a lot of stand-up comedians are people who like stand-up comedy are people who have felt like they can relate to them because they felt those things that they're talking about, whether it be that they can understand the Chris Rock because he's gone through same struggles as they have, or Nanette just came out, so with Hannah, I'm forgetting her last name, but either way, so that's what we see when it comes to American Identity. One question I do have, though, before let me find my question. So on page, it's on page 105 when he starts talking about stand-up comedy and American Identity in total, and so he talks about how there's like numerous comedians with various degrees of talent and who continue the tradition of the post-traumatic stress disorder stuff. And anyway, my question is, like, what do you mean by various degrees of talent? Do you mean like various degrees of being funny? Or that was one of my questions. And then my other question comes from page, it actually comes from page 109. And it has to do with the Ellen DeGeneres, where she starts when he says, this is especially true in her portrayal of homosexual audience members who choose to view DeGeneres as a gay leader, a role that, as we know, DeGeneres has explicitly resisted. I mean, I've actually gotten a chance to like listen to some podcasts where she talks about this, but I want to know why she's resisted it, and if it's because of hatred she's felt from the gay community, or but yeah, that's my last question.